Welcome to the webinar, everyone. This is Joe Hage. I am the Medical Devices Group leader, I guess. And before we start and before I introduce JP Maroney, I want to thank you all for helping me build what I think is one of the strongest communities on all of LinkedIn. So JP Maroney and I met, what is it, 2 years ago now? And
been at least a year.
And he taught me tools that I could use at Cardiac Science right away, and I really appreciated that. So when I had the chance to bring him to you today, I was excited to do so. I personally, I don't know, I've invested a few $1,000s with you, JP. I consider you to be a mentor, and I've learned a lot from you. So I'm really grateful for you to spend the time with the group today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. What I like to do whenever I speak, and I speak in conferences to all sorts of industry groups, and at the end, I will stick around and answer every single question you guys want to ask. So as you go through, Joe's going to be monitoring the questions, and once we get to the end of the actual agenda of the training, then I'll open it up, and we'll just blitz through and answer every question that you guys have. All right? So let's talk about a case study real quick, and I just want to give you kind of how the numbers work out on some of these things so that you can gauge this against what you need to do in your own business. So in a recent webinar, what we monitor, I want to lay this out real quick. When we do a webinar, we monitor all of the different phases, like how many people are getting the word out to, how many people actually click through to try to register, how many people ultimately register, how many people show up, how many people we close, and how much money we make off of it. And that way, I've been a big believer over the years that what you track, you improve. And so we track this stuff, and we constantly try to get better and better at what we do. And I suggest that you do the same in your own if you're going to apply this tool. So I'll give you a recent webinar. We had 618 clicks to the registration page. That means 618 people clicked on the link from an email promotion, just like you received. You know, Joe sent you out an email to the LinkedIn group and gave you an opportunity to join a webinar of a topic that you might be interested in. So 618 people clicked through. Of that, 394 people registered for that webinar. Of those 394 people who registered for the webinar, 128 showed up live. Now, I'm looking at the numbers, and Joe, it's working out about the same. Normally, we'll have about a third of the people who register actually show up live. And you say, well, that's kind of dismal numbers. Well, no, that's live. People register for stuff because they're interested, and some of them know kind of instinctively that, hey, there'll probably be a recording, and I can watch it later, which is cool. I'm okay with that. And then people who like to show up and like to interact and ask questions and get their questions answered, they'll show up live. And so we get both audiences. You get the group that's there live, but because of technology and the ability to record this stuff and replay it later, we can also reach the other two-thirds of the people that didn't show up live. On that webinar, we close 30% live on the webinar. Now, typically, we will close between 10 and about 40% live on a webinar. Usually, it's about 16 to 22% of the people who show up to a webinar based on a topic that we know they're interested in because they registered. We deliver solid content, give away great information, and as a result, people who want to take that to another level will ultimately buy. Now, you have to look at your own buying process and say, well, I want to use webinars in this way or that way. So I'm going to talk about some of the different models. Also depend on Joe, and also those of you guys who are on here and want to ask questions, to feed me with some scenarios and situations, and I'm more than happy to give you sort of some free coaching on here and say, oh, here's an application of that. Here's how you could use it. So feel free to give me the feedback in that along those lines. But once we do a webinar, then we'll put it onto a replay system and market to that group of people who registered. In other words, those 394 people. We'll give everyone a chance to go watch the replay. So as a result of the people that were on live and the people who watched the replay, we ended up with 50 new buyers. In this particular marketing funnel, the average buyer is worth a couple of $1,000s over their lifetime to us. So it's about $100,000 in new buyers that we received from that one webinar. Now, guys, Joe and I talked a little bit about this before we did this webinar, about what an average client is worth for you and your organization. And I want you to think about that for a moment. What is the average client worth for you and your organization? And I love interactivity on webinars. So and Joe kind of started that when he was saying, what's your background, what do you do, what sort of line of work are you in the medical devices industry? So here is a question I'd like you guys to answer. Any of you that know this number or have an approximate number, what is the average new client worth to you over their lifetime? Put it in the question box for us. I'd love to know what that number is. What is the average new client worth to you over their lifetime? All right, so can you do this? And this is kind of what I was just talking about. Number one, do you have a target audience? If you can nail down exactly what you want, who it is that you're trying to go after, and you can pinpoint that person, which is what you're already probably doing in your business anyway, then that's your first step. Next, do you have a solution to a problem they're willing to pay to solve? Period. If you don't, guess what? You're trying to convince people to buy something they don't need or want, and they're not going to buy. It doesn't matter what tool you use, whether you fly in on a jet or you come in through a webinar. It does not matter. So you have to have a solution to their problem, and it must be a problem they're willing to pay to solve. They want to fix it. Next, are you passionate about your topic? And the reason I say that, especially in this industry, guys, is I say this all the time, and I suggest you write this down. Never, ever, ever compete against someone who gets up in the morning and does what they do for fun. You'll lose every time. I'm serious. I believe that if you don't get excited about the solutions that you're providing, if you can't get charged up about your product or your service or your solution, then you're going to bore people and they're going to go away. And there's going to be somebody else comes along and says, look at this. This is the problem, the fix to your problem. I'm excited about it. I'm passionate about it. And I don't care what industry you're in. If you don't have that passion, people won't feel it. And whatever you want other people to think and feel about your product, your service, you must be thinking and feeling it first. People are very intuitive. They know if you're on a mission or just out for a commission. They know if you truly believe in what you're selling or you don't. And what happens is in a webinar environment, that belief or disbelief gets multiplied by a factor of however many people are out there listening. And so you have to be passionate about what you're talking about. And it's not just the product, because when you use webinars, you don't get on and say, hey guys, I've got product XYZ. Would you like to buy one? No. You teach them stuff that will help them be better at what they do or solve their problems, and then you give them a solution on a silver platter. You've probably heard that term, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Well, the fact is that people don't want to fish. They want the blackened tilapia on the plate with some rice pilaf and a side of grilled asparagus and a glass of wine. They don't want to know how to fish. And so when you do webinars, what you do is you create that blackened tilapia on the plate. You give them the total picture. You educate them. You make them better at their job. You make them more equipped and able to go and do whatever it is that they do. And as a part of that process, you introduce them to a product or a service. All right? And Jacqueline, I appreciate that. Jacqueline says webinars are absolutely appropriate. You just have to know what content to share. Excellent. Just like social media, it is new and scary, but it's the future. Webinars are not salesy. You're giving them content that shows you are a leader in your field. Thank you, Jacqueline, for saying that. That's really awesome. Okay, so let's talk about then the next thing is, are you willing to follow a proven model? Now, guys, I don't care what you're selling, sales is a model, right? So you could go and hear Brian Tracy or someone outside your industry talk about selling, and you could learn things from that person and say, you know what, I can take this back to the medical devices industry. None of my people, none of my competitors are using this particular approach, and I could totally blow up my company and make a lot more money. So that's what you want to do with webinars, is you want to take something that the industry is not using and not using in the way that we're going to show you how to do it, and take it back to your industry and stand apart from everyone else. I don't know how many of you guys have ever read The Purple Cow by Seth Godin. Great book if you haven't read that book. But the idea of a purple cow is that you're driving down the road and you see a cow standing on the side of the road, and you go, oh, there's a cow. You drive a little further, there's a cow. Drive a little further, there's a cow. Well, eventually you quit paying attention to the cows. You ignore the cows. But all of a sudden you're driving along and you can't resist. You look and there's a purple cow. You notice the purple cow. Well, marketing with the latest technology, with a better approach, with almost an expert positioning where you're becoming an authority not in just your product, but in an area of expertise of your market, and teaching people stuff that they want to learn, you can stand apart and become that purple cow. So that's the elements that you need. And now
I'm going to lay out the model for you. Audrey, it's called The Purple Cow by Seth Godin, Godin. Seth's written a ton of books. You've probably read some of his books. They're always small. They're easy to consume in a short period of time. So, yeah, great book. All right. Let me give you the model, and you can write this down. You guys want to know what the model is for delivering a great webinar? And I love what Jacqueline said. She said, you know, you just have to know what content to share. That's exactly what we're going to talk about here. But there's a way to present the content in a way that will engage the audience, get them excited about what you're saying, what you're teaching, will present them with both the problem and the solution, and then get them to take some sort of action. If you'll notice, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's not always about buying something at that stage. The webinar is not always about getting an order, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So here's the model. Write this down or do a screen capture, whatever you want. The first 5 minutes of your webinar, you want it to be your introduction. During that time, you're developing some rapport with your audience, you're building trust and bonding, you're getting some credibility. If you're being hosted by someone that audience already respects, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, that's big for you guys. And I've been telling Joe my opinions on this for the last couple of months, that I think that this industry is truly due for almost a turbocharge of the kind of marketing that I'm going to share with you, and that is having someone else host your webinar for you and introduce you to their audience and add some credibility. And guys, that can happen, and I'm going to tell you, you can go from 0 to 60 in record time with that style of marketing and coupling it with your webinar. So the first 5 minutes is being introduced. Sometimes it's fixing your audio. The next 10 minutes of the webinar is to deliver your big hook. In other words, whatever you promised those people to come, like if you told them, I'm going to give you the model of whatever, or I'm going to give you this major solution, or I'm going to give you a case study, and I'm going to give you a great example of one of my webinars. I'm actually going to go behind the scenes, open the PowerPoint from the editing standpoint, and show you step by step what I do at each stage of the webinar. So you'll see how to model this on your own. But when I talk about a big hook is the delivery of the promise. Whatever you tell those people, you're going to give them the exact model. Now, in our particular instance, one of the things I told you that I would give you was the step-by-step, minute-by-minute model of what we're doing. Now, this webinar is different because I'm teaching you a webinar on how to use webinars, and I never go behind the scenes like I'm doing. This is a very unique webinar, so I shift up the model just a little bit because I'm about to take you like a backstage pass and show you behind the scenes. But in all of my, quote, traditional webinars, within that first 10 minutes, I'm laying out a case study. I'm giving them some incredible takeaway value that if they were to get off of that webinar at that moment in time, their life would still be better as a result. Okay? Now, the thing that you see a lot of speakers do, I assume some of you have at some point in your life been to a seminar or a webinar or something where the speaker kept teasing you. We're going to get to the good stuff, you know. At the end, I'm going to give you this or whatever, and you felt like you were being led along, you know, by the ear, and they were just dragging you through it. I'm a big believer that the more you give, the more you get. But you got to give before you get. That's law. So if you give a ton of great value up front, instead of trying to drag them along for the good value, that they'll want to stay for the rest of the good stuff. And so that's why we deliver our big hook or give them, deliver on that big promise early in the webinar. Then we take 10 minutes, and these are approximations, guys, but this is a track to run on. Take 10 minutes to present the problem. Now, have you ever said this or maybe heard somebody say, well, if my market only knew how bad this problem was or only knew they had this problem, they'd want to buy what I have to sell. Well, that's a mistake. That is the result of someone creating a product and then going and trying to find a market and convincing them to buy. The real true way to create an amazing best-selling product is to go to the market, find out what their problem is, and then create a solution to it, which I hope that's what you guys, each of you, are selling. You're selling something the market already wants to buy. and they already know they have a problem. But your job during that 10 minutes, that presentation of that problem, is to rub salt in the wound. It's to agitate, to let them know how costly that problem is, to let them know what a mistake it is to let things to continue as they are. So if you're selling a particular device and your device would help people shave, $500,000 a year or a quarter or a month or a week or a procedure off of their expenses, then what you need to spend time talking about is how expensive, costly, and damaging it is to continue down the path they're currently on. That's what you do during that presentation of the problem. Then you're going to spend 20 to 30 minutes presenting a solution. And when you present a solution, now in your business where, let's say you're selling an actual device or gadget, a widget that's physical. When you're doing that, the presentation of the solution is not, well, so buy my thing. No. The presentation of the solution will be a set of steps that support, or that your thing supports. All right? So if your device allows them to monitor a certain response, or to control a certain reaction, or control a certain delivery of medication or whatever, and it does it better than anything else in the marketplace, well, then one of those steps needs to be controlling that delivery of that medication. All right? So you talk about all the steps that your product delivers in its solution. All right? And then you have a 5-minute close and call to action. And if you look at this, guys, I have people literally, and you could do this, Joe could do this. I have people that come to that are on my marketing list, that come to every single webinar I present. And you say, well, why would they do that, JP? Because they know that about 90% of what I do on that webinar is going to be nothing but pure giving and teaching. Like right now, have I even said, okay, well, in my book, or I don't have a book about this, but in my product, I don't do that. I just give, and I give, and I give, and I give. And that's what you need to do. 90% of what you're talking about needs to be giving amazing insider information, quality content. It needs to be, the latest studies, the best information, tricks that like let's say that you interviewed a doctor that's having some amazing success with your product or with a particular procedure. You should be sharing that. And obviously with his or her permission, but you should be sharing that and saying, hey, guys, let me tell you about this cool procedure or this way that you can fix this and do this, and here's how it worked, and here's what they did, and here were the results, here were the steps that they took, and you're giving, and you're giving, and you're giving. What's going to happen is, see, I do webinars, and here's my mission when I do a webinar. And I don't talk about this stuff when I do a webinar. I'm giving you kind of the behind-the-scenes psychology of it all. But when I'm actually doing a normal webinar, my goal, number one, is not to sell something. You go, well, that's stupid, JP. Obviously, you're trying to sell something. It is. But that's not my number one goal. My number one goal is to create a relationship with that person that is so strong that they say, this JP dude knows some stuff that I need to know, and I'm going to stick around and listen to him for a long time so that I can learn what he has to say. And then they come back webinar after webinar after webinar, and they'll buy sometimes, they won't buy sometimes. I look at business, and I can imagine you guys probably in some cases have a very long sales cycle. I'd be willing to bet. In fact, while I'm saying what I'm saying, why don't you guys put in number of weeks or months, and actually tell me which it is, weeks or months, what is your typical sales cycle? I'd love to know what that is. From the moment they get exposed to you to ultimately they put their signature on an order form somewhere. Okay, cool. Y'all keep doing that while I'm talking. So what I know is that I call this the carousel concept. You can write this down, the carousel concept. I believe that in life and in business that all of your prospects are on a carousel. They're going around and around and around and around. And what you want to do is you want to stand there in the same spot And every time they come around, you want to give them more value. Give them more value. Give them more value. Because I'm looking, it's really neat to see here. Philip, it says it's 12 to 18 months. Susan, 3 months. Brian, 6 months. Rajiv, 6 months. Edward, 18 to 2 years. Emily, usually 1 or 2 months. Brian, 6 to 12 months. Guy or Gay, 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Chris, 3 to 6. So you all have these different sales cycles, right? Thank you, Maurice and Ali and Sandeep and Jeff and Fran, Chris, for all the answers. That's very cool. So your people are on that carousel. And they're going around and around and around. And guess what? The first time they come around, they may not be ready to buy. They may be, I call it, being in a nest or being in bed with another supplier. They may be under a contract. They may be stocked up on a particular product or supply or whatever. Their urgency, the pain that would cause them to make a decision may not be significant enough yet. And so you get in front of them and you teach. And you educate, and you give value, and they go around, and then they go around, and then they go around. Let me tell you what, the longer you stay there, if all of your prospects are on that carousel, eventually some of them start buying. Some of them might buy the first day they see you. You do that webinar, and you have 20 people, or 200 people, or 2,000 people on that webinar, and one person says, I'm in. Give me a call, Rajiv. I'm in. And you pick up the phone, you call them, you close the deal, and 2 weeks later you've got an order and it's a $500,000 client you just nailed. But there may be a bunch of them that go, boy, what Vivian said just then or Ali said just then makes a lot of sense. We need to put that into consideration for our next quarterly meeting. And they get back on the carousel, and they go around, and they go around, and they go around. You stay there. And you continue to give value and educate and position yourself as a resource of great information in the marketplace. I mean, it's no mistake that Joe's running a LinkedIn group for your industry. No mistake, right, Joe? I mean, it's a positioning thing. And you give value and you give value and you give value. Webinars allow you to do that so that when they come around, then you're ready to sell. But when I do my close or my call to action, sometimes it's to buy something. Sometimes it's simply to take the next step in the sales process. So what you have to do is define, if you haven't already, and I assume some of you have very sophisticated sales funnels, and some of you may be flying by the seat of your pants and everything in between, okay? But you must identify what is the next step you want them to take, and that's what your call to action is on your webinar. It could be to go and fill out a pre-app form for demonstration. It could be for them to, you say, you've registered for this webinar, all you got to do is hit the button to raise your hand, and we'll see that whenever we download the spreadsheet, and we'll contact you and arrange for a demonstration, or arrange for a consultation, or arrange for an evaluation, or arrange for our 21-point checklist to help you identify the cost-saving measures that our system brings, or whatever it is that you're promising them. But your call to action, that's why I know when we started this, and Joe, you alluded to it, I come from an environment where I sell information and training and coaching and things like that, and that is a different type of selling environment at times than what you're doing, but it's still a sales process. And so when you look at this, guys, this will work. What you want to do is move them to the next step in the process. But every single person on that webinar will be closer to you. They'll trust you more. They'll be better educated. And I want to teach you one little thing. Write this down. This is an amazing secret to selling. In selling, especially what we do with education-based marketing, like I'm doing now, what you're going to be doing when you're doing your webinars, education-based marketing is you are setting the buying criteria. You are setting the buying criteria. And what that means is you are giving those people the criteria by which they will judge all competitors. And you don't get that kind of an environment in a typical sell type of environment. You get it in an education environment. And when you have people, let's say you partner with someone in your industry that already markets to the people you want to sell to, and they host a webinar for you, and you put 25 or 50 or 75 or 100 or 200 people on that webinar, and they're your hottest prospects, and they showed up because they responded to the headline and the bullet points and the promise that you made that they would learn how to do or what to achieve as a result of attending that webinar. Guys, those are your best prospects. That goes back to what I said. What would you rather do? Sell people one at a time or get them all in one room, whether it's virtual or physical, and sell them at the same time? And in that 5-minute call to action and close, that's when you're doing all sorts of cool things. And we do bonuses. We stack on the value. We do extra special offers. We do price drops. We do all kinds of things. And you can apply that to your industry. You could provide, let's say you have a certain area of training that goes along with your product, and you have a price or a fee, or say you have a subscription basis to it where they pay a monthly maintenance agreement or whatever, and you have some of those kind of things that are variables that you could throw in or include or bundle. That's where you do all that. So you're giving them compelling reasons to take action. And it could, like I said, it could be that you're not saying go here and put your credit card. That's not likely to happen in most cases in your industry. But whatever action you're asking them to take, give them a compelling reason to do it, and to do it by a particular date. So that's what you want to do in your call to action close. And I want to ask you, how many of you believe that if you were taught this in detail, that you could do this? I'm going to open up one of my set of slides here and actually walk you through one of my webinars. But how many of you believe that if you had some more information and you were able to put together a model for reaching your audience and educating your audience, that you could do that? I'd like to see you answer that in the question box while I go over to my slides. Give me just a moment. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Brian, Alan, Timothy, Sandy. Excellent. Another Brian, Fran, Emily. All right. Frank. Awesome. Oh, I got to figure out this. Alexander. Is that right? Did I do that? Did I get it right, Alexander? Jeff, all right. Susan, awesome. All right, guys, so let me go over here to this other set of slides. This is one of my by the way, you guys are wondering why I put my wife's picture on the slides. I told people that I added Tanya's picture to my slides. I used to only have mine. I added my wife's picture and the conversions went up. And Joe, what I'm thinking about doing is just deleting my picture and only putting Tanya's and see if they'll go up some more. All right. So let me scoot this over. See if I can kind of blow these. I'll tell you what, I'll just click through on these slides and I'll show you exactly what I'm doing. Brian says, good idea. All right. Yes, Eric, we will, well, actually, we've done that just a wee bit, but during our Q&A, I'll answer some specific questions as well. And we're not just about ready to wrap this up. I'm actually going to walk you through this. It'll take a little bit of time, but we'll be done here in a few minutes. Okay, so let me show you, going back to that model that we talked about, the 5-minute intro. This is right here, my 5-minute intro. I have a few quotes on there, and I don't just read quotes, but I give them the significance of the quotes, and then I give them the agenda. If you've ever taken a speech class or anything like that, it's basically, you know, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, right? That's the idea. Well, in a webinar, I think that agenda is really, really important that you give them for a couple of reasons. One, it helps people know what to expect. It excites them to stay on because this agenda, if you notice, is promises. These are big promises to teach them more stuff, right? Right here is the hook, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment when we get to that. But then right here, in my typical webinar, I will tell people, look, there's going to be an offer at the end. You know, we're going to offer to buy something. Or in your case, you may say, at the end, I'm going to ask you to say yes or no to a decision to whatever, you know, to take a next step or to take a next action. If you say no, that's okay. Everything leading up to that, you'll get better and learn more and get more information that you can use in your industry. But for those of you that decide to say yes, then we'll talk about what those next steps are. So you let people know that there's going to be a call to action. And I'm big on transparency. I believe that you need to tell people what's happening and be very transparent with them. Now, here is a delivery of a hook. Now, this is a particular webinar where I teach people how to convert their information knowledge into big ticket coaching. So in this particular webinar, this is the big hook or the promise. And if you'll notice, I actually have 1, 2, 3 screens here that detail bullet by bullet, point by point, what I did, why it works so well, the steps I took to succeed. And what happens is the people that are on that webinar are getting tons and tons of great value up front in the very beginning of the webinar, long before they get anything else. They're getting all of this upfront value, and that gives them a compelling reason to stay. Understand the psychology. I know guys that go, well, I'll give them a little chunk, and I'll tell them the good stuff is later, and they'll stick around. I'm a believer if you give them a lot of great stuff, they'll go psychologically, they'll subconsciously, they're going to go, well, if this is this good, I'm going to stick around and see what the rest of it is. And you say, well, my industry is different. Please don't say that to yourself. Don't give yourself that excuse. On this webinar today, right now, in July, in 2012, I want you to take away the excuse that your industry is different. The people that buy from you have problems, you have a solution, and there's a way to educate them. So you're going to look for what those big hooks are. And I'm going to give you a way. I'll actually, maybe we can use some of you as some examples of some of that at the end during the Q&A. All right, so then I show them that, and what I call this resetting a hook. So this is sort of like the next thing we're going to talk about. And then I back up and I talk about pain. And right in here in this particular webinar, I talk about what they're currently doing, the success they're having or not having, and that's where I spend my time agitating. And then I want them to know, hey, can you fix it? Well, yes, we can fix it. And then I give them the steps. So if you remember that 20 to 30 minute presentation of the solution, here's where I do this. So I say your steps to success are, and I give them all the steps. They could write those down. They could screen capture that. Their life would be better just with that. But then I take each of those steps and break them down. I give them detail. I give them case studies. I give them examples. I show them how it will work. And all through that, like I've done with you, I'll try to engage them and get their numbers from them and say, and plug them in and say, well, here's how that would work for you. All right? So here are the steps. I'm going through them, teaching,